here at the NFL Scouting Combine in Indianapolis, and pleased to be joined now by NFL insider for NFL Network, Tom Pelissero. Tom, thanks for spending some time with us. We know it's a very busy week for you, working the phones and doing what you do. So we'll begin right here. We'll jump right in. We know that this is cap compliance season, and the Bills have a lot of work to do there, as you know, and they've already started. You kind of broke the news about Connor McGovern's restructure earlier this week, but that's just the tip of the iceberg here. There's a lot more work to be done. Do you sense, and maybe based on your experience with teams this far over the cap, more cap casualties, restructures, or contract extensions? Is there? I mean, you got to have a balance. You can't do all one thing, but how do you kind of see the Bills getting to where they need to be in a couple of weeks?
When you have a team that is built to win right now and that should be a contender, you're usually going to see them borrowing from the future, because that's the biggest misconception about when we talk about the salary cap and cuts and all these things. It's every dollar you spend hits the cap eventually. Yeah. There's no cap magic. There's no way everybody, okay, they're redoing these contracts. How the cap doesn't exist? No, it does exist, and that bill comes due eventually. If you run up a credit card bill, somewhere down the line, somewhere in the future, you either die or you pay it, okay? And the NFL is certainly not going to die. So at some point it becomes due, but you are able to borrow short-term money. You can roll things into the future. The Bills are one of those teams that's in that spot. And so for a guy like Connor McGovern, who you might have been sitting there going, okay, could he be a cap casualty? No, instead they flip it to a signing bonus. They actually guarantee it so he sticks around. Yeah. You certainly could see more of those, and those are what we call the simple restructures, where you're just taking money that was previously base salary, you convert it into a signing bonus. It buys you space now, but again, that bill does become due in the future.
And Josh is probably one of those guys, because there's a cap conversion option there that's pretty straightforward. You might be able to wipe out half of that number.
Right, and that's the whole thing. And quarterbacks are the easiest one to do, because once you get past that first year of the contract, usually, and I, off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly how Josh was structured, but I'm pretty sure it was big signing bonus, low base salary in year one. That's how most of those are. Well, then once you get past that, you've got these big base salaries. So every year you can go into the piggy bank. What you want to be cautious about always is all of a sudden you do that so many times and you add voidable years, which wasn't the thing that was really common, but more and more teams did it coming out of COVID when the cap took the 1 year dip. Well, now the fact that the cap goes way up, you wouldn't think, just because the cap goes up for everyone, everybody's got more spending power, you wouldn't think it ultimately matters. But the number of GMs who have said to me this week, well, good thing that cap went up, because that saves us from some hard decisions. A lot of teams were budgeting for $243, $245. It comes in at $255. That's extra $10 million you're playing with now, but cap space is eternal. It doesn't mean you got to burn through all of it. You can roll over anything that you don't use, and everybody's always trying to strike that balance.
Let's flip to what's going on at the Combine this week in the NFL Draft. One team who has quite a bit of power is the Bears. They hold the number 1 pick. Do they trade Justin Fields? Do they draft a quarterback with that number 1 overall pick? What have you been hearing out of that camp, and why do you think that first overall pick is going to be so interesting this year?
Well, Ryan Poles came to the podium the other day and said, I don't have a quarterback master plan to unveil, contrary to reports here. Listen, this is a data-gathering mission for the Bears. We're still 2 months out from the draft, but we're less than 2 weeks away from free agency. And ideally, if you're going to trade a quarterback, you're hoping to get, in the case of Justin Fields, a first-round pick would be great. Realistically, maybe it's something with conditions. It starts out as a 2 or 3, whatever. But when you're making a trade of that type of magnitude, you're going to want to do it before free agency starts, because that's when other teams start to make different moves. Things dry up. They're going to want to bring it to a head if, in fact, that's the direction they're going to go. I think that a lot of signs are pointing toward them drafting a quarterback, and there's a lot of reasons for that. It's not all about Justin Fields and the inconsistency in his play, although that's certainly a component here, but it's also about, we just talked about the salary cap. It's the long-term management. When you are a team that goes into year 4 of a quarterback contract, you're usually trying to pay that guy right now if you're convinced he's the franchise guy. Well, the Bears don't seem certainly sold on doing an extension right now with Justin Fields, so you're going to have to pay him sooner than later. All of a sudden that changes what you can do with the rest of your roster, where if you draft a Caleb Williams or whoever it might be, you reset that clock. You have that guy at a cheap rate for the next 4 years, relatively speaking, and that can allow you to make a bunch of other moves. So I think that internally they've got a pretty good idea what direction they're going to go. Reading the tea leaves of it, going all the way back to the offensive coordinator decision, it has seemed like they're building for Caleb Williams to come in here, but there was no rush coming into this week. Have the conversations. talked to Caleb Williams for the first time. Mm-hmm. You really haven't spent a lot of time with him here. So you have your initial meeting with him at least. He's not going to do anything on the field. You're not going to get medical, but at least having that conversation, figure out, can he be, from a personality standpoint, is this a fit? That conversation needed to take place, not to mention all the other conversations they can have with other teams about Justin Fields, or maybe even people trying to blow him away with an offer to get the number one.
Right, because I think a lot of people forget it's also a decision for that other team because there's a quarterback involved in whatever trade you make, namely Justin Fields. So it's a big decision for anybody you're talking turkey with right now, too. That's, I think, the other part of the equation that maybe doesn't get as much notice out there when they're just thinking about, oh, what are the Bears going to get? So it's an interesting conversation from both sides if you kind of look at it that way. Speaking of big decisions, I think we're all anticipating the Dolphins are going to have an extension lined up for Tua here, which is going to be a major, major investment. And they also got a guy that is looking to make over $20 million a year on the defensive side of the ball in Christian Wilkins. Do you think they can make both work in the same offseason?
Well, I mean,
fit it under. I mean, they're 50 over too.
Right. Well, I mean, there's a couple of different things here. For one thing, Tua would be on his fifth-year option. So you're talking about the lump sum hitting the cap right now. If you do an extension, it's actually going to drop his cap number. So that's going to help you in 2024, even though it's obviously going to put a lot more on the books into future years. With Christian Wilkins, they're in a spot where, you remember, the franchise tag would all hit at 1 year, too. And for defensive tackles, it's a pretty big number.
Yeah.
So you would like to get extensions done with both of them if you can. You know, they're going to release Xavier Howard at the start of the league year. There are some other moves that they're probably going to have to make. They're still waiting to figure out.
Another guy, right?
Agba's another guy they moved on from. They don't know 100% with Teron Armstead. Is he going to continue to play? Because he's got a really big number and some money that fully vests in a couple of weeks here. So a lot of moving parts. But, you know, Tua, he did exactly what they asked him last year, which was just stay healthy. Do whatever you got to do. He's doing the jiu-jitsu or whatever it was and making sure that he knows how to fall the right way. And it sounds silly, but like it was a big deal because he can't afford to take head hits.
Yeah.
You know, at this stage, he played at a high level. There were a lot of things that happened down the stretch when they're playing without Raheem Mostert and they're playing without Jalen Waddle. And I know that every Bills fan is watching this and saying, don't make excuses for the Dolphins. Bills won fair and square. Anybody's got injuries, like it's an injury league, man. You know, like the Bills have been through a lot of different stuff. You go back to 2022, they had just a remarkable string of injuries even before the DeMar Hamlin situation. You know, Vaughn going down early in the season.
Terrell Bernard for the Chiefs game.
Right. So, yeah, everybody's got injuries. A lot of it just comes down to when are they timed up. Usually, not every time, but usually if you look at the teams that are there at the end, they're the teams that avoided those catastrophic type of injuries or just didn't have guys with the little nicks that they're missing a week or two when you have must-win type of games.
Yeah. Let's stay in the AFC East here. What are you hearing about the new philosophy in Foxborough and the strategy that Elliott Wolf is going to use to get the Patriots to become a team who can match the talent in the AFC East?
Well, it'll be fascinating to see, and I've known Elliott a long time because I worked for the Green Bay Press-Gazette back in the day, and he was a young scout up-and-coming at that time. His dad's the legend. Ron Wolf, who helped rebuild the Packers in the 90s into, you know, the Brett Favre, Reggie White Packers that everybody remembers fondly, at least from my childhood. You know, Elliott's a really sharp guy. He's brought in some other people that have a background in Green Bay, including Alonzo Highsmith, who was with him, also went to Cleveland with him when John Dorsey was the GM there. But they know they need a lot. I think that's fair to say. Patriots have a lot of cap space. They've got a really low cash spend as well. Just based upon the way that they've structured, they got a ton of free agents. Like, I mean, I think essentially this is a slight hyperbole, but like their entire receiver group and offensive line is a free agent. So you're talking about major turnover on that team, and then you don't know that you have the quarterback answer. Mac Jones is still under contract. He's entering year 4 on his deal. I find it hard to believe that Mac Jones is going to be the starting quarterback of the Patriots. It would really, really surprise me. But as of now, it's still on the roster. So yeah, you've got a lot of different things that you're sorting through there. And what they're going to have to decide is, listen, we don't ever want to be drafted number 3 again. So do we take the quarterback now and then try to, between spending money and other things you can do in the draft, build around him, or do you trade back, amass more assets, knowing this is a bigger term build, and then hope you got a different quarterback option that's out there for you? It's going to be really interesting.
Last one for you. There's a thought that Gabe Davis is probably moving on, that someone will pay him in free agency, and it'll be too rich for Buffalo's blood. People are trying to connect the dots already. They think because Ken Dorsey's in Cleveland now that the Browns could be interested. Who are you hearing that might be interested in Davis's services on the free agent market?
Well, I think that a good way to figure out free agency is often figuring out what coaches went someplace else and who might be trying to bring that guy over. I would anticipate the Browns are going to be in the receiver market. Amari Cooper's been really good since he got to Cleveland for, I think it was a 5th-round pick a couple of years ago because the Cowboys didn't want to pay his salary, and they end up getting that guy who's really good. But they need that dynamic guy opposite him, and so Gabe Davis would make a lot of sense. I mean, I think there's a bunch of teams that are going to be in on Gabe Davis. I mean, if you look at the wide receiver market, Mike Evans is obviously a really interesting one. He's an older player at this point, but he's still getting his 1,000 yards every single season. I know the Bucs want to keep him. We'll see whether or not that's a possibility. After him, you've got this group there at the top of it. Receiver market can always be funny just based on, there's always a couple of deals that get done in the first day or two of free agency that are like bonkers. It's the Christian Kirk, $18 million a year. It's Corey Davis getting whatever it was, $11 million a year a few years ago. With Gabe Davis, that deal could be anywhere $12 to $15 million a year. I mean, Gabe Davis is going to get paid here. It's going to be challenging for the Bills to bring him back. He sounds like a guy who maybe wants a fresh start here. One way or another, he's going to get his money.
Tom, thanks as always for the time. Appreciate it. We know you're busy, so thanks for making some time for us. We appreciate it.